Michael, thank you very much indeed for coming along to this podcast. And it is a great opportunity to follow on one of your other great successes recently, which is the Disrupt HR conference. In fact, you are a marvelous speaker and a great ambassador, both for the work you do in terms of mental health, but also for the lifeboat. Tell me a little bit first about HR Disrupt and your experience of that.
Yeah, well, the whole experience was quite nerve-wracking to begin with because when I was approached to come on as a speaker, I was like, yeah, this sounds brilliant. And then I blessed my nan. We had a bereavement. We lost nan, and I hadn't completed my slides, and I was like, oh no. So I had to quickly put something together, and then I sent it on to Insight and Disrupt, and then they were like, it's a bit wordy, and I was like, hang on, why is it wordy? And then I looked at it, I was like, it is wordy. So I quickly did it in January. And then I said, okay, that will do. And then it's been so busy, I didn't have time to rehearse too much. And I was like, you know what? I know it. I'm going to wing it, as we all do.
Mm.
And I said, right, how can I wing it something that means something to me? So I spoke about my journey of illness and mental health and the reason for why I help people with their mental health problems and how my previous career got cut short. And it went really well. But the best thing for me was how all the speakers came together. You've met 15 people that you don't know, or 16 people that you don't know, and you say, hi, I'm Michael. You say, hi, I'm Tim. Hi, I'm Susan, Timothy, and the rest of them. And we looked at each other and we're like, right, well, we're all in this. There's no escaping. There's no going to the toilet and said, oh, see you later, and making a dart. We all came together and we became like a family. And I think for me, that made Disrupt. And then when you see everyone walking in, instead of the nerves being there, it's the excitement. And everyone got on stage and was like, right, let's go for it. And we all applauded everyone. And yeah, it was just a phenomenal experience all in all, how we all came together like a family and Insight were absolutely amazing. The audience were amazing and so receptive of everything that we shared as speakers. But also they took away, wow, these are individuals just like me. And I hope that it's inspired the next group of people to come on board as a speaker too.
And one of the things that I sense from you is a combination of two things, which is an interesting mix. Um,
Bad things.
you're very patient. You will spend time with people. You are empathetic and listening, but also you're quite driven. At times you come across as quite manic. You do so many different things. How do you balance that, finding the time to be with people and cramming so much into your life?
So, from an external point of view, people could say it's cramming things into their life, which I don't blame them. People are like, Michael, you're going to burn out. You're going to burn out, or Michael, watch yourself. You've got all these businesses on the go, and life's hectic. You're also part of the lifeboat. But I'm that person who can stay calm in the chaos. I spent time in the front line in South Africa, medical volunteering in India. You learn to be around chaos. And being calm in the chaos is what makes me feel like I'm alive. You know,
Mhm.
people they look at force 10 winds and going out to sea as the worst thing they could ever imagine. To me, that sounds like the best thing I could ever imagine. And
Mhm.
I think during my time of illness, I was on a lot of benzodiazepines where you are zonked, you are like this. And I remember there was a time of my life for a whole year where I would have to look at what I have to do in a day. And I would say, right, I've got to do this for 2 hours. So I'd sleep 2 hours before and I'd have to sleep 3 hours after because I'd be so tired.
Mm.
And so being off them meds now and being healthier than I've ever been, I look at life and I'm like, I want to grab every little bit of it. So when people say you're cramming so much in, to me, I'm living.
Mhm.
I'm living. I like there's not a better thing than going and spending time with someone, just genuine time. But then all of a sudden you're back in your business, and then oh, there's a lifeboat call up, and then I'm off, and then I'm back on the business. It's people view work as work. I don't. I view it as living because I love what I do. And I think perception and perspective changes a lot in the way that we do things. People say, oh, I couldn't manage what you do. That's where your stress point is. I have a lot of good stress and a lot of bad stress. I'm rubbish at admin, Tim. If I have admin to do and I have to do it for 12 hours a day, I'll burn out. But
Hmm.
if I'm helping people every day to make a difference to their lives, or helping organizations every day and looking at how they can help their employees globally, that's what wakes me up. So if I wake up doing that and I'm happy, well, I'll wake up every day with a smile on my face. So I think it's down to, we've got lots on, but it's down to your perception perspective of it. That excites me as opposed to burns me out. Does that make sense?
No, it does. But what's interesting about that, and for a lifeboatman, this might be an interesting phrase, but you're the captain of your ship rather than the crew of somebody else's. And
Don't
clearly,
trust me driving anything, by the way, Tim. One thing I'm not good at.
but I mean, as somebody who's a serial entrepreneur, owns his own business, there is a lot of pressure, but also you do have a lot of freedom to choose. And of course, you provide advice and guidance to people who aren't in that position, who do tread the Monday to Friday, very often the 9 to 5, but we are increasingly seeing flexible working. What is your advice to those people who perhaps don't have the freedoms of being an entrepreneur, equally don't have some of the pressures, but what's your advice to the everyday people who would be watching this podcast?
I don't. In what sense? In what do you mean? What sort of advice would you are you asking me to give?
Well, I'm just curious that how you manage your time, I imagine, would be exhausting for many other people. I recognize that you have a unique character, but you also have unique situation being an entrepreneur with businesses that largely there's a lot of work getting them to work, but once they're working in the background and it gives you the freedom to do a lifeboat call and stuff like that. Not everyone has that. And I'm just wondering when you're teaching, when you're training, what is your advice to those people?
So when I'm teaching mental health, say, I look at it where I I've seen some horrific things in my time. I've seen people die in the most peaceful ways, and I've also seen people die in the most horrific ways. And I've first aided people who have it recently just who have had a cut on their hand. And it reminds me of a time where I worked in an intensive care unit, and there was this lady who was unwell. She was an elderly lady. She had surgery and she also had kidney failure. So popped her in ICU. And when she was in ICU, when she was in ICU, she was there just because they wanted to check on her in case she
Mm.
declined. But she was fine. And then there was a man who was coming off life support machine after a stroke who had his kids around him. And it was quite hard hitting. And the daughter of the old lady came in and started crying. And when she started crying, she looked at her mum, wailed, and left. And she went just outside the room, and you could hear her crying. And the mother was in a bit of distress. So I said, "It's fine. I'll go and see how she is." And I went out the room and I spoke to her. And the first thing I said, "What's wrong? Can you tell me why you're crying?" And she said, "I can't believe I'm crying because there's a man who's coming off life support machine, passing away, and I'm crying over my mum who's there fine and is able to talk, and she'll be moved on to the ward in a bit." And I said to her, I said, "You can't look at someone else's story and expect it to be the same as yours because your emergency is your emergency, but your feelings are valid. Everyone has a different stress point in their life. Everyone has a different point of when they reach breakdown. What we can't do is compare someone's life to another person's life because it then makes us invalidate who we are and our stress points and our values." So this woman said, "Yeah, you're right. I do have a right to be scared for my mum. She is unwell, but she's going to get better." And I never once said, "Your mum's going to get better. It's just say it's shame about that person." But what I did say to her was that your feelings are valid. And it's the same as when I first dated someone with a cut hand the other day. Regardless of what I've seen, that was the worst time of their life
Hmm.
because they'd never experienced anything like that. So I was there for them. So if you're asking me for advice on someone who maybe doesn't have the freedom to jump on a lifeboat who works for themselves, it's don't invalidate what you do and make sure that you stay true to who you are, understand your stress points. And if you have a higher threshold, then do go for it and reach your aspirations. And if you haven't got any, do something that you love, work on things you love, and spend time doing it. If you don't go hard on yourself because you can't compare your life to someone else's because it's your life. So show purpose to who you are and be there for yourself and be there for your family, be there for your loved ones, and live life through meaning for what you want to do as opposed to any other individual.
One of the challenges is very often we are driven to compare ourselves either to what social media says that we should be doing, what news or television advice says that we should be doing. Indeed, even in performance review and appraisal, we are compared to our peers or compared to some sort of standard. And I think the challenge is context is so important. What you're going to do in the middle of Brexit or the middle of COVID or in the middle of winter, the context can change things quite profoundly. And so it's not always about the individual, but the context that they're in.
Yeah, I agree, and if we're looking at it for workplace, mental health and leadership, I find context does play a big part in it. When you're looking at someone who can't manage workloads,
Mhm.
say, instead of saying, oh, well, that person can't manage workloads,
Mhm.
they should move into a different team or potentially take time off because they can't manage their time. When you look at the likes of coaching or say the workplace coaching for performance and well-being, you can look at what reasonable adjustments you can make instead of looking at it as in context of that person's not good at their job, so therefore we need to do this. It's how can we make reasonable adjustments to help their job role, and how can we mentor and coach them along their journey to help them get better and understand their needs as opposed to looking at it from our perception, because then context comes to life.
And
I think
that's interesting because, of course, there's a chunk of your work which is literally training people on mental health, but
mm,
there's also quite a significant part of your work which is helping employers create that right environment.
yeah, 100%. You look at culture, culture plays a massive part in how people feel. I look at workplaces as how you would look at your partner who you love.
Mhm.
You want to be with somebody who tells you what to do and you don't have a say. Who's someone who moans at you all the time and tells you you're not good enough. And you feel like you can't have a safe space to open up your opinion or open up about your mental health, or if somebody around you dies, are they going to show up and be there? That's what I look at as a workplace comparing it to someone you love. Don't get me wrong, you shouldn't fall in love with your employer. I mean your actual job itself. But people say, oh, my work doesn't care about me. And I find that quite sad when people have that perception, because the average person spends 90,000 hours working. So one third of their life working. So if you're in an environment where you don't feel safe all the time, not only is that going to affect how you feel at work, it's going to affect your life. Because if you're on the same job for one third of your life, and that's now your perception of what work is, it's going to prove negative on your physical health, your overall mental health. You're going to be exposed to risk factors, that can really decline your own mental health. So when we look at it in the workplace, we look at how do your employees feel? What's your employee assistance program like? Do you actually tell your employees that you've got an employee assistance program? How can we build onto that? What about your leadership skills? How's that? Do you manage people or do you lead people? Do you have power over people or do you empower them? So when we understand the actual culture of an organization, we can implement positive training to have more positive outcomes, where you look at the acute and abrupt conflicts with mental health problems or crisis, so crisis management intervention, mental health first aid, and then we look at a proactive approach where we look at workplace coaching for performance and well-being, ongoing support for those who need it, coaching in the workplace and mentoring. So we look at two sides: how to handle acute problems and how to empower people for a tertiary problem and change culture and make sure that everyone's well from a local standpoint and also a multi-jurisdictional standpoint. So that way it stays cohesive across the business.
I think you make a really good point there. And I think it's interesting to explore. And you touched on those two extremes, the extent to which you control, decide, to the extent to which you empower and let other people decide for themselves. And very often people do very strongly identify with their jobs. And so you'll get phrases like, I am an accountant, rather than I'm somebody who does accounting, or I am a lawyer. So your identity, your personality is embroiled within your profession, your trade. And to a large extent, employers might welcome that because they're sitting there saying, well, this is loyalty, this is attachment, this is a sense of belonging, like I am a Manchester United fan, and that's the way I'm going to be forever. But at the same time, if you secure yourself to that rock, that can also be problematic if you suddenly find out this is a fairly uncomfortable place and maybe you want to maintain a little bit of your own autonomy, your own identity. What is your experience working with people going through crisis? Do they turn to the workplace as the savior, or is sometimes the workplace or the work scenario the one that's actually problematic? Because I can see it being challenging if the workplace was effectively both.
I I see it from both angles. Not that I see people who are in crisis because of workplace. I see people who have been in crisis where they've had something go on at home and they've had other mental health conditions that have led up to this point,
Mhm.
and they've opened up about it in the workplace. So I've seen it from one place to the other. And the thing that stays the same is the crisis where somebody does feel like they are at the end. They do
Mhm.
feel like they potentially want to end their life. They do feel like they can't carry on anymore. And
Mhm.
they see it from both angles. They see it from, right, I need to open up to my mental health first aid, or I need to speak about this. I can't speak about it at home, but then I'm also like, I can't. There's also people who say I can't speak about it to my employer, I'm too scared. So to answer your question, yes, I do see it from both sides, but the one thing they both have in common is 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 that they're in crisis. And it's all about maintaining the safety of that individual and empowering them to seek the professional support that they need. And 9 times out of 10, we do see that people get the support that they need.
But that's a really interesting point and maybe more of a HR related question. But if we, and I'm considerably older than you, but if we go to my earliest days in the workplace, people would say, well, what you do in your home life is your own private affair, and what you do at work. And those two are clearly segregated. And we're talking about well before social media, work from home, and everything else. Nowadays, it's pretty much a blended approach. It very often people are encouraged to be always on, and even if they're not always on, they flexible working means that your home life does have an impact on your work life. Your work life does have an impact on your home life. What you think, feel, or do on social media probably has some sort of implications for work, and you need to be mindful of that. I'm unconscious that must make it really difficult for the employer to draw reasonable boundaries of to intervene and when to let people just be and respect their privacy.
I agree. I agree. So, for example, I'm in my workplace right now, and you're at home. We're both working,
Mhm.
but we're talking to each other, smiling because how we feel
Mhm.
is good. I'm really enjoying this podcast. But if we're really sad right now, and I talk to you about how I feel, and you talk to me about how you feel, it's the same. We're both working, but it's how we feel. And that's one thing that we need to remember is we look at how somebody feels when they're in the workplace, but then look at how the workplace makes them feel. Does it make them feel happy, or does it make them feel worse? Does it make them feel sad? And what can we do to change that? And we could say it feels that the workplace makes us feel sad. Yeah, I mean, and that we're looking at depression here. But if somebody has post-traumatic stress disorder from something that happened in their past, and I'm sat next to this door, and if it's slamming all the time, and I'm sat here, and it's making me really triggered, and it's making me remember these events. Well, yes, this happened many years ago, but my trigger is still here. So
Mhm.
what can the workplace do? Move that individual to a different working environment, maybe change the door so they're not slamming. So it's not the employer's job to fix someone, but it's the employer's job to make life easier because they're going to be spending 1/3 of their life within this organization. Everyone is so unique, complex, and deserves to feel happy and safe within the environment that they're in most of the time. So we look at employees and employers' responsibility with mental health. And if you look at your employees' responsibility, well, that's ensuring that you're showing up to the training that's been given, you're working with your employer to develop, say, your own care plan around your mental health, and your employer's responsibility is to implement these things,
Mhm.
to so that they're willing to empower them. But sometimes you get, oh, well, they didn't do this, they didn't do that. And we're back and forth like this, and it's hard to get a happy medium. So what we do is we go in slowly. So that way you look at the acute problems and then you look at how you can help someone from a tertiary scale, and you empower both the employer and the employee. So you move along like this.
It strikes me that one of the most important things is the willingness to open up, the psychological safety to feel that you can explain what your needs are, and the reassurance that the organization can, by one means or another, support those needs. And which is a bit of a catch-22, because you don't necessarily know that they're going to be supportive until you open up. And until you open up, there's not really much that people can do. I mean, what are your thoughts or experience around that?
So there is support on island, from various places. You can go down the therapy route, or you can go down the route of medication therapy. So there is support networks that aren't just internal. And then when you look at people opening up in the workplace, there are places that you can signpost you out of work where you can't get it in internally. People have employee assistance programs. They are lucky enough to have them. Not all employers are able to give that. Not all people will open up as well, which is why when we say to get people trained up in, say, workplace coaching, crisis management, mental health, first aid, or have mental health awareness sessions, because those who are qualified, if you have more people who are qualified, you've got a bigger variety of people for someone to choose to open up. Tim, I absolutely love you, so I'd be more than happy to open up to you. But to Joe Bloggs down the street, I might not be able to. So having more people trained can provide more of the support internally for their needs. And then when they are ready to open up and you then get the signposting that they need, the people trained will be able to understand their problems and understand the best therapy for their condition, suspected condition or diagnosed condition, and know where on island or off island to get that help. And for those who don't signpost, those who don't open up about their problems, it's important to create a culture within the workplace where that person feels like they can. And hopefully, with time, they will.
That's really useful. And I think the point about a support program is key, knowing that there is support that can be called upon if the mental health first aider can't necessarily do everything, if indeed the organization has one, which it should. But even then, that person is a first aider. They're not a paramedic, they're not a surgeon. And so in terms of mental health, there is that need sometimes to refer or seek external support. What does a program look like? What does a support program actually entail?
So employee assistance programs within organizations, they look at how employees can be assisted physically, mentally, so that could be anything from your physical health to your mental health and your family's health in some organizations. But there's also other ways within an organization that you can access support internally from different jurisdictions with no border policies. So having an employee assistance program in place allows employees to go onto it and access support internally or externally for their needs. So that way the provider would probably get this with their insurance, and then it would be cohesive with what the organization stands for and does.
So it'd be like a sort of cafeteria style benefit for the employees so that they can use that sum of money to do yoga, fitness, meditation, therapy, coaching, etc.
Yeah, that's exactly that.
And how many organizations are starting to do that? I mean, the old phrase, snooker table and fruit bowl has been around for a while.
Yeah.
But actually being more interventionist, being more the type of program that you talk about is still relatively new.
Yeah, so I've spoken to a lot of firms over the years, and you've got your law firms, your financial firms, your trust administration firms, that and insurance firms. They often have these in place. There are local businesses that don't have them in place, so it's incredibly difficult for them to access the support. So we act as a support network for them, where they can signpost us on for care, for therapeutic services or further training in how to be there for them. So where we can be that outreach for them should they not have an employee assistance program.
So Lifeline is more than just mental health training. You actually have quite a broad portfolio of interests, and indeed even a phrase like Lifeline kind of extends to your other interests in the lifeboat, of course. But tell me about the breadth of work that you do at Lifeline.
Yeah, so we have Lifeline training where we look after local and global organizations with their mental health training. We also do other things like first aid, fire safety, health and safety, and lots more. Lifeline Care Group, we look after individuals in the community aged 3 to 25 with mental and physical health problems. And we've got Lifeline First Response, where you rent a pendant, and should you need any first response care, whether it is anything from I drop my cereal and I can't pick it up, you'll click your button and we'll be there within 10 minutes. And you've got all the way to I fell down the stairs, can you be here, please? And our team's trained with expert casualty care training to look after individuals within the community. Then we've got Lifeline Therapeutic Services that look after individuals from a therapeutic coaching style to help individuals feel empowered in themselves and set goals, and who do feel challenged to be able to maybe feel at one with their condition.
That's a really broad and vitally important service to provide. How do you manage to stay on top of that? Because in some respects, for some respects, it's probably as quick a response as the emergency services.
So we will have people, and we do have people who are north, east, south, west, and central. So that way, if people are based in the north, anything that happens in the north, they're only 10 minutes away on average, same as in the south, and the east, and the west, and the central. So that way, we put it into a sort of geographical location, and we get the closest person who is on call in that area to respond to that individual who is struggling.
That's an amazing setup. I'm actually, really impressed by that, because I recognize I've done some voluntary work in some of the charitable sectors looking after health, and it is a challenging environment in which to work.
Yeah, it certainly is. It certainly is, and recruitment can be difficult, especially in the charitable sector, in the healthcare sector, which is why we look to empower our staff. We look at care as one thing, but then people are like, but I would love to be a trainer. No problem. Your expertise in mental health, we'd love to help you train our corporate clients in how to look after people. And as you do it all the time, it will be amazing for you to share stories about what it is you do and empower people who are caring for people in the workplace. But I also like the idea of being a first responder and doing casualty care. I've done the course. No problem. Would you be happy to go on call twice a month, 3 times a month? Yeah, that sounds great. And then in the future, would you put me through training to maybe be a coach? Yeah, no problem. So we try work the business as a conglomerate where people feel empowered in their job role, but also have a skill set that still stays around helping people physically and mentally, which is what Lifeline is. It's we want to be a lifeline for people, families, and organizations.
And I'm really interested because you're clearly a man with vision, drive, passion, and enthusiasm that makes you super busy. What would you say your leadership style is like? I mean, how do you kind of stay on top of this, or indeed, how do you delegate, or how does that work for you?
Well, I look at it and I ask people, what's your passion? What would you love to do? I'd love to do this. Brilliant. Do you feel like you're good at it already? Yeah. All right, we'll go for it. If you're struggling, let me know. I know the organizations very well. So if you're struggling, come back to me and we'll meet up once a week. And then you empower people and oversee how well they're doing. Or I'm not too sure. Well, instead of saying do this, do you think this would be a good idea or not? Yeah, I think it would be a good idea. Why? Or because X, Y, and Z. And you're empowering people to understand their role as opposed to telling them what to do within it. So I think if you ask me what kind of leader I am, I'd like to say an empowering one, but I can't say that because I can't tell you how good I am, because I might be rubbish and everyone might have the opposite sort of look at perspective on me. So I do try my best to empower people, and instead of giving them the answers, sort of empower them to get to the answers themselves. So that way they feel like they've learned something and that they can teach the next person and empower them too.
And I imagine there's some challenges around that insofar as there's a lot of that's said about the idea of you recruit for attitude and you train for skill. But of course, in a regulated business around healthcare, of course, you can't necessarily, I mean, clearly there is training, but you want the people that you're engaging to be fully trained and fully capable. So that must make the sort of recruitment process and finding the right fit between having a great attitude but also having a great skill set. I mean, how do you manage that balance?
So, if, just to make sure I understand your question, are you asking me how I make sure that people feel accepted when I'm recruiting them, or how they feel empowered on the recruitment process? What's the question? Just so I know.
Well, a combination of both. I'm fascinated by the argument that says we should recruit for attitude and train for skill, as if skill is secondary. And actually, there's an argument that maybe skill is secondary. You can pretty much look up anything on Google. You can find out anything from ChatGPT. So maybe actually skills are not important anymore.
No, I
Actually,
agree.
attitude is.
I agree. So the Navy SEALs do it the best,
Mhm.
where they have a diagram. It's a bit like an L, and we look at high performers and high trust. And we always want people to be here, which is where the high performance, high trust. But it never happens. It never happens. And they look at sort of the trust in the battlefield, and they look at the trust with your life. It's like, do I trust you with my life? Do I trust you with my wife? Is what I've always heard. And if you can trust someone, you can build their skill. Even if they're not amazing, you will always trust them. And trust built over time. And you can easily empower someone to learn the skills for the job. You can learn skills and you can help them learn skills and empower them in the role and help sculpt the role around what it is that they would love to do. But what you can't do is break trust, because once trust is broken, it's very hard to repair. It's the same as you smash a plate and say sorry to it. Is it back together again? No. So if we look for trustworthy people, we can help empower them with their skill set, as opposed to, and as an employer as well, if we break trust, then they're not going to trust their employer, which leads to that whole culture of the bad mental health, and that you're worried about speaking to your employer. We don't want that. We want people to feel empowered. We want people to feel energized about coming to work. So it's important that you maintain trust. So yes, to answer your question, skills can be learned, but I think culture, trust, and the way you are as leaders plays a big part in that.
I think you make a really interesting point, which I'd like to explore a little further. I think there's no doubt that trust is vitally important to any relationship, and relationship is really important to performance. But the challenge is that trust is an easy word. It's actually quite a difficult concept to
Yeah.
grasp. You know, I trust the sun will rise in the morning. That's trust in terms of predictability. I trust you because you're just like me. That's an interesting one because if we only trust people who are like us, it opens up to prejudices and biases. What does trust mean for you?
I think trust means that through any battle, through any storm in life, through any hardship, through any good thing that happens, we'll always have each other's back.
Mhm.
And if you need a shoulder to cry on, you can trust me that I'll be there. If you need me to help you in any way, shape, or form, I'll be there. And that's what trust means to me. So, it's not I trust you to be the same person I am, because I think we can all agree if we had 20 different me's running around, you would get very annoyed, Tim. It wouldn't be a good place to be. But it's having that trust that we can go shoulder to shoulder and that I will be there no matter what. But I would really appreciate if I could trust you enough to do the same. I think that's the kind of trust that I mean. And that's the trust that I stand by. I've got quite a few beautiful friends who I know I'd be able to go into storm with. I would happily, I mean, on the lifeboat, when we look at trust, it's trust that we'll be there for one another. And we can have an argument as a crew just before we go out on the shower. It's forgotten about. But we trust each other to bring each other home, as well as the casualty who's out at sea. And when we look at trust, it's that we have trust in one another to do right for each other.
And I think the lifeboat is a very, very good example of a trust environment and probably something that many of us could empathize and understand better than perhaps being in the SAS or the Special Forces or the Navy SEALs. What is that trust environment built on? Is it habit? Is it routine? You touched on you could fall out with somebody, but there's still a professionalism that keeps you together. What is it that lifeboat crews do to build a trusting environment?
Willingness to learn and come together, no matter how hard it is. Don't trust me to helm a boat, or be the coxswain of the all-weather lifeboat. It's not my forte, but I have trust in every single coxswain and helm to get me home safe. The same as if there was an acute medical problem. I'd like to think that they trust me and they trust the training that I've also helped them with. And I trust all of them. I trust all of them to go to sea and look after a casualty because I've seen firsthand that they've learned and they wanted to. I trust every mechanic to fix the engine when we're drifting into rocks. I trust every single individual on that crew, but I also trust them when we get back to the station and we've seen some sad things that we'll come together and have a hug, regardless of our own views, and I find a lot of the lads are there because they want a purpose in life and they want to feel that purpose. They want to feel energized and that a bit of adrenaline junkie kind of feel that they feel close to death, which makes them feel alive. And that's how I feel. But what we do is come together as brothers and now brother and sister, one female crew. And yeah, it's a really, really nice experience. So when we look at trust in one another, it's just trusting that we'll be there. We all live our own lives. We do it voluntary, and you get 8 people going out on our all-weather lifeboat. We need a minimum of 6, and we need to go. I have to trust everyone that will be there, so we have enough people to go save lives. Because the day that we can't launch is the day that the lifeboat stops. So there's trust in one another that will be there for each other and for the individuals who are stranded or suffering, or the casualty vessels that may need our help.
And trust very often is built on skills and learning and experience. How long does that take? How long is the training period, for example, to be on the lifeboat?
It depends on how quickly the courses can be put in place, but there's a probation period of 6 months to a year, and then you're just as crew on the boat, and then you've got to work your way up to, if you wanted to work your way up to coxswain, you can be talking anywhere from 3 years, 4 years upwards, or around about there. It all differs depending on what role you want to go into. But yeah, for the first 6, 7 months, you might be shore crew, where you're from the shore and you're helping out people who are on the boat. So there's a lot of commitment that you have to do to go out and be on the boat when it's been called out in anger. So yeah, it can be lengthy, but that's where that trust is built.
And I'm interested in that, the point at which a gang of 6 people become a group, and the point at which a group of 6 people become a team. And it obviously takes time, but and if we look at any of the uniformed service, be the military or otherwise, they do spend a lot of time together building as a team. And teamwork, it strikes me, as the prerequisite to trust. It's very difficult to trust somebody who's perhaps not in the same team or comes from the same background or
Yeah,
training.
I find I can have lots of business relationships that over the last year have developed into friendships. I find when you're on a lifeboat and it's force 10 wind, and sometimes if you're coming back home, you make friends pretty quick and you learn to trust very quickly, because I remember when out on a force 7 and we had to put the searchlight on top of the boat, at the front, on the bow of the boat. And when I put it on, I nearly fell off, but my crew member caught me. And then we put it on, and then it was really rough. Our search navigation wasn't working too well, so we had to go and do it on the one outside, and we're holding each other up, clipping each other in. It was quite a full-on experience. So you did everything in twos, but you relied on your person when you were doing a job to watch out and save your life, and vice versa. So you automatically are forced into a situation of trust sometimes. And when you do come home safe, that level of trust has went from here to here.
Hmm.
It's going to take a lot for that to come back down,
Hmm.
because now I trust that person who I was paired up with probably my life and my wife, kind of feeling, because I might not have went home
Hmm.
to my loved ones if I fell in. You know,
Mm.
I've got a very good crew that probably would have got me, but we were also on our way to a casualty vessel. So when we look at trust, I think we're put in situations where you build up trust much quicker than the average because you're put in situations where you have to trust. But the training that you're given and the training that you do with everything from how to handle a boat to seamanship to casualty care to slip trips and forward manual handling, every bit of training you do on the boat,
Hmm.
there sometimes an anger when you need it. And when you see that come into place, you trust that the people know what they're doing. And then when you have them debriefs about the hardships that you've had, you can then learn to trust one another, both physically and mentally, and that you're in a safe environment within the crew.
I think that's a marvelous example of a real life experience. And I think it really is brought home when you talk about what happens on a lifeboat call compared to when in business we talk about trust without necessarily the same pressures, the same constraints, the same rights, rituals, habits, and working together. So I think that's a great insight. Thank you.
Yeah, appreciate that.
So we reached the end of almost an hour. It's been a
Wow,
fascinating.
quick.
It did, yeah. It's been a fascinating conversation, stretching from mental health to lifeboat. But there's a common theme throughout, and it is looking after people, being there for people when they need it. You recently spoke at Disrupt HR. The videos will be out soon. What are the things you're looking forward to, say, over the next 6 months? What's great for you coming up?
We've got some great projects that we've got lined up, you know, for bringing organizations together globally, cohesively around mental health. That's really exciting. We've got a lot going on with the care company, recruitment processes, and empowering individuals to get trained up and looking after people. We've got a lot of new courses that we've got coming up in mental health and coaching. And yeah, I'm really excited for this year ahead. I'm really excited because there's more people that we can help, more organizations we can assist. And I'm just really looking forward to helping with that and empowering individuals who do need our help.
Michael, thank you very much indeed.
Thanks, Tim. Always a pleasure.